Well, hello and welcome to the first of my little video tours of the Churchill War Rooms in London. My name's Don Brown. This is me, sat in Churchill's chair in the Cabinet Room in Churchill War Rooms, and I do, in normal times, 40 or 50 tours a year of the War Rooms, and I thought I'd share a little bit about that with you, as they're currently off limits to everybody. In later episodes, I'll take you into the Cabinet Room itself, tell you all about the atmosphere that would have been in there. You can see the wooden chair there in the background that Churchill sat in, facing the three chiefs of staff in front of him. We'll also go into the map room, the very heart of the War Rooms itself, staffed from the start of the war in September 1939 right through to the Japanese surrender in 1945. First of all, though, I thought I'd give you a bit of context about it, a little bit of an overview of what happens, and try and explain a bit why it was built, the reasons why it was built where it was, and some of the things about it that aren't immediately obvious, such as the fact that even though it's sometimes called a bunker, it very much isn't. It's the basement of an office block. If it had been hit by a bomb, and as we'll see later, a bomb landed maybe 20 metres from the corner of the Cabinet Room but didn't go off, if it had been hit by one of the German bombs during the Blitz, it's unlikely that the building would have survived. So first of all, a little bit of context, why it was built, the reasons why it is what it is. It all comes from the preparations that were done by the defence staff in 1936 onwards. Germany had been recognised as the largest threat to the British Empire, certainly in Europe, and there was a worry that the German Air Force was so strong, was so powerful, that within a few hours of war breaking out, London would be devastated. In fact, in 1936, the estimates were that there'd be 200,000 casualties in London every week, 60,000 people killed a week. So preparations were starting to be made, both at an official level and at a domestic level. You see gas masks issued. This picture here shows everyone clutching their little cardboard boxes with their gas masks in. Gas had been used in the First World War, and there was a great fear that the Germans would be dropping gas bombs on the civilian populations. Also, air raid shelters, the one you can see there, that little bit of corrugated steel covered in soil in someone's back garden, is known as an Anderson shelter. These were issued from 1938 onwards and were dug into back gardens. There were other ones that were inside people's houses called Morrison shelters. What was trying to be done at a higher level, though, was a coordination to have a central war room. This was delayed by a large amount of inter-service rivalry because the threat of bombing was so great, and the RAF felt that they should be in control of the structure, the planning. The Navy, being the biggest of the armed services, felt that they didn't want to take a secondary position, and the army as well wanted to maintain their independence. However, by 1988, it had been agreed that there should be a central war room to help coordinate things. The next thing was where it should be. The two gentlemen you see here on the right, one is General Hastings Ismay, and he was Deputy Secretary to the Committee of Imperial Defence. who were charged with putting this together. On the left is Leslie Hollis, who was his assistant at the time, later became the commandant of the war rooms. Between them, they are the ones who got the war rooms together. The plan was to have bunkers, proper bomb-proof bunkers built in the suburbs. There was also another plan called the Black Run, that if the destruction in London became too great, government would move into the countryside and into the regions. But the actual bomb-proof bunkers that needed to be built weren't going to be ready for several years. Early 1940 was the best estimate for that. So Hollis and Ismay looked around for somewhere to build a temporary structure to be used as a central war command. They lighted upon a building called the New Public Offices, housed part of the Treasury, which it still does. The Treasury is still built on there. On the corner of Horse Guards Parade, Great George Street, Whitehall. Although it looks an old building, it actually was relatively modern. It was from early 20th century, so it had a steel frame, a steel structure, and that was regarded as giving a little bit of extra protection against any damage, any sort of bomb blasts. They started work on that in 1938. Originally it was going to be just for the armed services. Then in May 1939 it was decided that the cabinet was going to move in there as well. It was done in a hurry. There was cabling to be put in, there were connections. The corridors that were in there led off into little rooms that were full of archives. They had to be come out. Various bomb protection had to be put in to protect against blast, to strengthen it a little bit. The parallel I will always use is that if you're going to go and buy a raincoat, you can get some that are waterproof, or you can get some that are showerproof. This is very much the equivalent of a showerproof bit of kit. If it had had a direct hit, it's unlikely to have survived. It was chosen as well because it was convenient. If you map where the Cabinet War Rooms is, it's a short walk from Downing Street, it's a short walk from Parliament. The Cabinet Office, which control the coordination of government, is just there on Whitehall, and the three main headquarters of the different armed forces are also close. So it was convenient, it was a useful place for people to go to. They got ready. Despite everything, it was put together, it was operational by August 1939, the last week of August 1939. There were certain compromises, the main one of which is that there was absolutely no running water. So no flush toilets, no way to wash. Jugs of water had to be heated up and brought in. So you can imagine, not a pleasant place. Also, there was no comfortable sleeping accommodation. Various emergency accommodation was done for staff in the sub-basement, the little space underneath the basement. Parts of that are only about 4 foot high. It was damp, it was smelly, it was infested with insects and rodents. People really did not want to stay there. You only stayed there if you had no other alternative. But it was ready, the map room was ready, they moved in. It was fully operational in the last week of August 1939, and the lights were on. They didn't go off again until Japan had surrendered and the place was closed. So last week of August, it's there, ready to be used. Within a week, war breaks out. The Germans invade Poland. from one side, the Soviet Union invades from the other. Britain and France had given a guarantee to Poland that their sovereignty would be protected. An ultimatum was given to the Germans. When that was ignored, Britain and France and the Empire declared war on Germany. The bombing raids that had been expected within 6 hours of a declaration of war didn't happen. This period is known as the phony war. Things were going, there was a few sort of skirmishes on land, there was plenty happening in sea. RAF planes were dropping leaflets on Germany, but really nothing much significant happened until April 1940, when it all kicks off big time. The Germans invade Norway, the British try to move against them. Pretty disastrous campaign. Ultimately, the British troops have to be evacuated from Norway. Early May, there is a vote of censure against the government in Parliament. The government win, but by a much reduced majority. And on the 10th of May, Chamberlain, the Prime Minister, resigns, and the King sends for Winston Churchill to head a government of national unity, a coalition government that brought in all the major parties. 10th of May is also the day that the Germans invaded France, the Blitzkrieg that drove its way through the French and British forces, and within 3 weeks the British were having to be evacuated from Dunkirk. They hoped to get 100,000 men off the beaches. In the end, 350,000 British and French were evacuated back to Britain, an incredible feat of logistics. But from that date on, late May 40, after France falls a few weeks later, from then on, Britain and its empire and dominions are the major forces standing up alone against the might of Germany. Germany controls Europe. This is when the moment of greatest peril comes. The Germans are lining up on the French seaboard, preparing to invade Britain. Their planes now are less than 2 miles away from the British coast. Preparatory to the invasion, Hitler's Operation Sea Lion, the Germans launch attacks against the British airfields. This is the period known as the Battle of Britain, July through to September 1940, when British, Canadian, American, Czech, Polish, French, Australian, South African, New Zealand, and many other nationalities, young men helped repel the Luftwaffe's attacks on the airfields and turn the tide, made Hitler realise that he couldn't get air superiority against the RAF. From September, there becomes a change of strategy. September the 7th sees the first major raid against London, a daylight raid in the evening. From September through 1940 through to May 40, September 1940 through to May 41, London is bombed nearly every night. There are fewer than a dozen days when the Germans aren't bombing. Nearly 20,000 tons of high explosive dropped on London, over 30,000 people killed, 1 million homes destroyed. It's a terrifying time for the population, a time of extreme peril for the government, and this is when the war rooms come into their own. had a few near misses. Here's a little map. The star is where the war rooms are. The red dots on there are bombs that fell in Westminster and exploded. You can see the half a dozen that had fallen on Buckingham Palace over to the left. The blue arrow points to a bomb that exploded just by the corner of the Cabinet War Rooms, but didn't go off. An unexploded bomb, which these are 250 kilos of high explosive. Had that have gone off, it's likely that the whole front building came down. You can see here on the war rooms some of the later bomb protection put in, and we'll discuss that a bit later. There is a concrete apron, a concrete skirt around the new public offices, which was designed to try and mitigate another explosion like that, to any bomb damage. This was added to with a thing called the slab, 5 feet of concrete and steel that sat across the entire war rooms. But that's for next time. And also next time I'll tell you why all the clocks in the building are set at 2 minutes to 5. So next time we'll have a look at the Cabinet War Rooms itself, the Cabinet Room, the room that Churchill stepped into in May 1940 and said, this is the room from which I will direct the war. So I'll show you a few of the secrets of that. So until next time, goodbye.